The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
I've got a lot of content for you today. I'm trying to drop my first video that I've dropped in quite some time later on today. Also have patrons only video going out later on today. And then this podcast. You should be a patron. Matter of fact, I need every single one listening to the sound of my voice to go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show. Help me continue to do this work. There's a tweet from a friend. I consider him a friend. We've slightly done some work together. Slightly. Not directly, but indirectly did some work together. Walker Bragman. And so I'm going to read his tweet. And the only reason I mention his name, usually, like, if you are a vocal, whether you have a blue check mark or not, which he does, but if you are like a vocal, outspoken person about a topic, then I will reference you, your tweet. So it's not throwing shade or anything. It's like just giving people credit where credit is due, even when I disagree with them. Only time I don't mention a person's name in a tweet is when they are just kind of a random person on Twitter that stimulated a thought process in my mind. That being said, Walker said something on Twitter that has taken me back to a topic that a lot of people hate when I discuss this, but I've got to discuss it. Republicans are neoliberal. They are. Period. Here's Walker's tweet. And actually, this conversation is an offshoot of Walker's tweet, and I'll lead you to why I come to making that the central thesis of this podcast. His tweet is about, let me just read it. He says, quote, France offers America a glimpse of what would have happened if Hillary Clinton had won in 2016 and what will happen if Joe Biden wins in 2020. Just look at this timeline. Neoliberal centrism ultimately cannot defeat fascism because the inequality it fosters fuels fascism. Okay, he's saying a lot in that tweet. And it sounds good. It sounds good if you don't dig into how illogical that tweet is. And I like Walker. And I honestly think Walker is a smart guy, and he's too smart to be peddling this. But it's easily peddled because it's such a popular thought process on the left that we left unchallenged. Me particularly left it unchallenged while I guess I went on my vision quest or whatever I was doing for the last 2 years, trying to work with two different companies. And here I am. Anyway, I digress. The point is that, listen, two things. Number one, Republicans are neoliberals. They are worse versions. They are the worst versions of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is an economic paradigm above anything else. It focuses on free markets, deregulation of the markets, deregulation of the banks, deregulation of the financial sector, not just banking, but trading. It is an economic paradigm that seeks solutions in the private market above anything else. That's what neoliberalism is. And I'm afraid that those of us on the left have embraced a misnomer. Neoliberalism, as it is used in American politics, is a misnomer because we apply it to the Democratic Party or centrist Democrats. Now, centrist Democrats are certainly neoliberal, but if you understand that neoliberalism is first and foremost an economic paradigm, then you have to understand that Republicans are the worst when it comes to neoliberalism. They are the greatest example of neoliberalism. With Trump, you have one or two outliers that would challenge the idea that he's a free market neoliberal. But it's not because of any economic belief system that he has. It's more about his ego. The fact that he's in this trade war with China. That's more about his ego than anything else. Donald Trump does not have a definitive economic policy other than what benefits his own personal pockets and what benefits the pockets of his friends and what benefits his ego. And that happens to be probably a 99% embrace of neoliberalism. Look at the tax policy. Look at the efforts to deregulate everything that Obama tried. As much as people called Obama a neoliberal, he tried with the Consumer Protection Bureau, founded by Elizabeth Warren. There were tepid at best, but there were attempts to moderate the excesses of capitalism, as Brandon Sutton would say from The Discourse. Go check out his podcast on Patreon, The Discourse. Democrats tried to moderate or ameliorate the ravages of neoliberalism. But see, when you get stuck on the word, I literally have had people in my mentions saying Republicans can't be neoliberal because it's liberal. And I'm like, serious, bruh, really? That is as ignorant as saying that China is actually a communist state because it has communist in its name, or that North Korea is a socialist state. Let's start here. Neoliberalism no. Let me back up even further. How we define things in the United States is uniquely different than the international community. A conservative in the United States compared to the international community cannot rather be compared to conservatives in the UK. Now, while the left is fighting the Tories in the UK and they rightfully have an all-out war, ideological war, the economic policies that they're trying to push back on, there's a lot of things to be desired with the Tories in the UK. However, you cannot compare American conservatism to the Tories, the Conservative Party of the UK. You cannot. American conservatism is a rabid strain. It is far right, fascistic, and I mean it is so far gone. Where in the UK they're trying to get rid of their national health services. They're going to try to privatize it, and they're going to try to privatize it with the help of American conservatives because that's what they do best. But as it stands, UK conservatives right now, I mean, they see the rationale behind something that we would call Medicare for all. Whereas here in the United States, they feel like it has to be privatized. There's nothing that should be nationalized. Not our not our healthcare system, definitely not our oil and energy system industry. Not our education should be privatized. Hell, roads should be privatized. Schools should be privatized. I already said that. Fire departments should be privatized. Conservatives here in the United States are the most extreme example of a privatization, which is at the core of neoliberalism. And so the misnomer, there's a definitive difference between international political ideology, as it's defined, and American political ideology. Here's even a better example that you would 100% agree with. The Democratic Party here in the United States is more closely aligned to the Tory Party in the UK. So the liberals here in the United States are conservatives in the UK. Everybody's going to agree with that because that's the nice talking point that the left embraces. But if you understand that, then you have to understand that economically, whereas liberals are the conservatives, what the hell does that make conservatives in the United States? It makes them extreme neoliberals. That makes them extreme proponents of privatization, extreme proponents of deregulation, extreme proponents of free markets. With the rare outlier that is predicated on Trump's ego, that is based rather on Trump's ego, far more than any, he's not conforming to any economic ideology or paradigm. He's acting out based on his ego. So now that being said, you have to understand that in America, neoliberalism is a constant between both parties, with the extreme coming underneath the Republican Party. Look at it now. Look at the tax breaks from Donald Trump. Look at who it's finally coming home. Who's it benefiting? Corporations, big business, and the wealthiest people in this country. So if anyone, and the reason I'm giving all this in context of the tweet that made me, I had to get home and get to my microphone so I could discuss it, is because if you're telling me that the electorate is going to lean towards fascism because of neoliberalism, then what the hell is your explanation for the full embrace of the rabid strain of the cocaine-driven neoliberalism on steroids that they have gotten underneath Donald Trump? So they have embraced both neoliberalism as well as fascism. So how can you say that it is a reaction to neoliberalism that pushes people towards fascism when they get to Donald Trump and the fascism of the right, they not only embrace the fascism, but they embrace the neoliberalism. My God, people, or do you understand that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, the entire purpose of it is to forward neoliberalism economic policies, capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, the joys of the free market. That's literally the entire purpose. The folks who call themselves classical liberals, they base that classical liberalism based on free markets. They don't base that classical liberalism based on any type of social justice issue, any type of progress on social issues, period, any type of freedom and progress for the LGBTQ community, any type of freedom and progress for marginalized communities, black communities, brown communities. They don't do it on, base that liberalism on lifting the foot of the oppressor off of our necks. They do it 100% based on economics. So pray tell, how then can you explain the reaction to the effects of neoliberalism pushing people into fascism when neoliberalism is run amok in the American Fascist Party, known as the Republican Party, classical liberals, all of them? They are whores for capitalism. That's a phrase you really never really ever, I don't think I've ever used that phrase on my show before. They are shills for capitalism. A more virulent strain of capitalism, the type of capitalism that really does not care to even moderate the excesses of capitalism. See, Democrats, FDR, all he really did, he came to do was to make sure that the majority of the American people could tolerate the ravages of capitalism. That's all Bernie Sanders is going to do. That's all Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to do. But at least they do that. At least they do that. I mean, come on, let's be realistic. Are you waiting for a full-blown revolution? Do you think that the people who are running into the arms of the Republican Party, into the arms of the right, see, this is, I'm about to actually stand up. I'm usually sitting down, but I'm about to stand up because this is how ridiculous. When you reduce neoliberalism to merely being the Democratic Party, the establishment party, and you use neoliberalism as the justification for why this electorate moves to the right and move towards barbarism and fascism, it's a convenient way to completely erase the fact that at the core of that move has always been the bigotry and the hatred and the fear of being replaced. That is what is at the core of the rise of anti-Semitism in this country. That is what's at the core of the rise of racism and white nationalism in this country. Because the constant, it's not even a constant. But I'm going to say the same thing twice to make a point. There is a constant of capitalism and the ravages of capitalism that goes across both parties. So you can't use capitalism, neoliberalism, free markets, laissez-faire capitalism. We're using them interchangeably because for better or for worse, they are interchangeable, easily interchangeable. You cannot use neoliberalism as a justification for people moving from the left towards fascism if when they get there, they get fascism and they get neoliberalism. And they clearly understand that, because now after 2 years, no one can tell me that Donald Trump is an economic populist. Not a single person who believed Donald Trump was going to make America great again economically can say that after 2 years, he's made America great again for the working class economically. But what has he given them? He's given them a virulent strand of white nationalism that permeates the Republican Party, the conservative movement in this country. So that constant, you cannot throw, a variable cannot be a constant. A variable cannot be a constant, people. You cannot use neoliberalism as the variable that moves people from one side to the other when it is a constant on both sides. So the logic of it falls apart. As you can see, this is rather exasperating. Because it's been so diligently and intentionally used as a foil over the last 3 or 4 years. And whereas we do have a neoliberal problem in the Democratic Party, you cannot say that it is the reason these people are going towards fascism. Just on GP, just on general principle, anybody who embraces fascism because of their economic condition was going to embrace it anyway. There's something in them that drives them to see that as an acceptable solution to their problem. Fascism, white nationalism, xenophobia, all of them I'm using very loosely to represent the ideology of the right as it stands in the United States of America today. But I told you I was going to say it 2 different ways. The first way was you cannot have, I guess I've actually did say it 2 different ways. Number one, the first way I would say it is that because it is a constant, the only difference is that the Democratic Party makes tepid at best. Paltry attempts at ameliorating the ravages of capitalism to make it a little bit more tenable. They try to save like Robert Reich, the former labor secretary for President what's your boy name? Bill Clinton. He wrote the book Saving Capitalism from Itself. So at best, at the very best of the Democratic Party, they try to make it livable, make capitalism able to be endured. The very best, FDR, he wasn't going to do away with capitalism. He just made it better for the middle class to be able to enjoy some of the spoils of capitalism. You can't possibly become a revolutionary when you have to pay a mortgage. We talked about that last week. So the Democrats, where in one sense, it is a constant. Neoliberalism is a constant in this country. But in another sense, the Democrats are actually doing more to help people survive capitalism. They will never challenge capitalism because, as Nancy Pelosi said, she's a capitalist. Well, Bernie Sanders is a capitalist, folks. I hate to break the news to you. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a capitalist. All they're going to do at best is replicate what FDR did for the 21st century and include black people this time. So, if the problem is neoliberalism, I need you to come a little closer, as my pastor would say. If the problem is neoliberalism, then there's no way in hell you go to the right where you're going to get a more virulent strand. It's like the uncut heroin. You know what I mean? It's like the purest strain of neoliberalism comes from the Republican Party. And so if you believe that neoliberalism is the variable, then hell, you either go far to the left and just become an all-out communist and be rather frustrated in a country that would probably rather use nuclear weapons on the masses than to embrace communism. But I digress. I have a whole episode on that. But you either go far to the left or you just give up and say, okay, I'll be establishment because at least we're trying to, we'll institute a program to get rid of homelessness. We'll give some tax incentives for billionaires to become philanthropic, and maybe they'll do something really nice for Skid Row. If you think that neoliberalism is a variable, and if you think neoliberalism is a variable, then you have to consider the fact that the worst example, the worst type of neoliberalism comes from the Republican Party, and at least the Democratic Party tries to ameliorate the ravages of it. The greatest example of that being FDR, but he never challenged. He was not going to destroy neoliberalism, free markets, capitalism. Now, that being said, here's what this conveniently does for people who like to use neoliberalism as a variable that pushes people towards more neoliberalism, right? I don't think I said it that clear and that succinctly. When you make that argument that so many people on the left make, then what you're saying is that neoliberalism drives people to an even worse brand of neoliberalism. I didn't even say that good. When you think neoliberalism is the problem that moves people, then you're saying that it's moving them to even more neoliberalism. I know I've said it 3 times, but I just had to repeat it because it bears repeating. Or it bore repeating. I'm done. So if you believe that, it is extremely illogical of you to put that together. Because if anything, if you're tired of what the economy is doing to you, then and you want to operate in this two-party system, then you have to operate with the Democratic Party because at least they pretend, at least they do a little bit here. Maybe, they're going to look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's big recommendation. We're going to cut interest rate down to 15%. 15% is going to be the maximum interest rate that you can have in this country. Well, bravo. I actually can benefit from that. But hell, that is in no way, form, or fashion. And Bernie Sanders joined up on that too for everyone who's going to be like, oh, that's AOC. She's not a real socialist. Well, Bernie Sanders, your hero. He's a part of that too. 15% does nothing but ameliorate the ravages. It helps you be able to endure the fact that you're getting hit across the head with an obscene interest rate. So 15% is way better than 26%, and I will gladly accept that. And so if the problem you're having is with neoliberalism, then where do you go? Do you go to the Republican Party who will say, hell, we should deregulate it altogether. Let credit cards charge whatever the hell they want to charge. If a credit card wants to charge 50% interest APR, let them charge it. That's their right because corporations are people too. Or do you go with the establishment who's going to protect capitalism but try to make it bearable for the little people? So instead of paying 50% that the Republicans would let you pay, and instead of paying 26% that you would pay right now, ask me how I know, you'll pay 15%. My dude, that's actually a win. I'm saying it as if I'm frustrated with it. I'm frustrated with it because it doesn't really challenge capitalism. It protects capitalism, but I digress. While we're still living in this system, I would much rather have 15%. And if you're following me logically, that should suggest to you that you would, here it is. 50% represents the Republican Party. Hell, Republicans would let you get 100% APR. They don't care. Free markets reign supreme, bitch. Or you go with the current establishment that allows for 26%. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it goes to 30%. I don't know. I just kind of know there's an interest rate of 26% out there. Don't ask me how I know. So you got Republicans at 50%, Democratic establishment at 26%, and you got Bernie Sanders over here at 15%. Now, of course, you're going to want the 15%. I want the 15%. But if you're telling me that the problem is neoliberalism at this 26%, where it exists right now, the Democratic Party represents that 26% because that had to have come underneath Barack Obama as far as I can remember. If you're telling me the problem is 26%, then does it make sense for a person to say, oh, I'm so tired of neoliberal Democrats.
I'm going over here and I'm going to go with the party that's going to allow credit card companies to charge me 50%.
It makes no sense whatsoever. Republicans are neoliberals. Neoliberalism is primarily an economic term. It has nothing to do with social ideology. Except the fact that you find neoliberals globally tending to be more progressive on social issues. But fundamentally, it's about open and free markets, deregulation. And to be fair, I said something earlier that was not quite accurate, because neoliberalism is in fact a reaction to Keynesianism. FDR wasn't really a neoliberal. If I said that earlier, it's probably because I was in the middle of a rant. He was far more to the left. He created the paradigm for which neoliberalism was a reaction. But still, he protected capitalism. He saved capitalism from itself. Whereas there could have been a real revolution against capitalism underneath FDR, he instead saved it, much like Bernie Sanders wants to do. And I'm not knocking it because I just gave you the example. I would much rather pay the 15%. We're currently paying 26% APR if you got bad credit and you got a credit card. But if you let Republicans have their way, they are itching for the opportunity to allow credit card companies to charge and auto loan companies to charge whatever interest rate they want to charge. Literally, this is not hyperbole. These are actually plans on the books for the Republican Party. So it makes no sense for you to make the argument that people who are tired of the current economic paradigm would run to an economic paradigm that would exacerbate their current condition. Okay. Last but not least, I can't believe I've just been yelling for almost 30 minutes now, but it's extremely frustrating. Last but not least, what this fallacious argument does, it completely, whether you try to or not, whether that's your intention, Walker, who I consider to be a friend, and Walker's just, he's just one of many people who make this argument fallaciously. It's wrong. It makes no logical sense. But what it allows you to do, whether you're trying to do this or not, it gives people who are looking for the embrace of xenophobia and white nationalism and what's the phrase I'm looking for? I wrote a whole article about it and it escapes me at this moment. Nativism. It gives people who embrace and want to embrace an American style nativism and have a rejection. And by that, I mean a very specific. I don't mean this melting pot of America where there's a diversity of cultures. I mean this white identitarian American nativism. It gives them an excuse that all but absolves them of their nativism. It gives them cover. Because if we already established that neoliberalism is a constant, therefore it cannot be a variable. If we established that, and I made my case, and I would argue anybody that logically, it's a done deal. Neoliberalism is a constant at best. At best. If you treat it as a variable, then that suggests that they would either stay with the establishment or go to the left. But you don't respond to the rejection of the left by the establishment by going to the right. In other words, in that 50%, 26%, 15% model, little theory that I put, the little game, whatever that I pieced together, you don't say, hey, I'm mad. I'm mad at the people who are charging me 26%. Democratic establishment. Because they won't let me get 15%. Bernie Sanders. So instead of sticking with my 26%, I'm going to show them, and I'm going to go to the people who are going to give me 50% interest. I showed you. Makes no blanking sense whatsoever. Bury that argument. It's dead. But what you do is you give a convenient cover fire for nativists who are just they are tired of the progress that's being made by the LGBTQ community, by brown people in this country, by black folks who are descendants of slaves, who are owed stuff in this country, who are owed reparations in this country. They're tired of us colored folks. Very specifically, they're tired of Black Lives Matter. They're tired of people taking a knee. They're tired of people challenging what it means to be American, challenging the entire idea of American culture, trying to make American culture something more than just white identity and make it something more than white Christian men, white Christian male dominance in this country. They're tired of that, and they feel alienated in a country where they have all the power. I mean, God, they have all of the power, economic power, political power. And because the only thing that we really have is social power, and we're pushing back on the social power and making, and in that way, we're challenging the American culture, and they're losing their minds. But instead of addressing the real reason anybody would ever move towards this nativist, white nationalist fascism that is best represented currently by Donald Trump, instead of addressing the real core underneath it, you lay down cover fire and say, oh, it's neoliberalism. Right. Now, I would agree with you that they're probably dumb enough to actually do this to themselves, where they say, oh, I'm so tired of this 26% interest rate. And gosh, they won't allow me to go over here with Bernie Sanders where he's going to give me 15% interest rate. So hell, I'm going to show them, and I'm going to go into the Republican Party's arms so that they could give me 50% interest rate. Maybe they are that dumb. But the driving force underneath it is this nativism, this American nativism that is trying desperately to lay hold or to maintain a grip on what it means to be American. And what it means currently to be American is to be a white Christian man. Now, I have a wonderful episode that breaks that apart and shows you how adaptive that American nativism really is, and how it expands to include anybody who's willing to work for them, any black person, any Jewish person, anybody who's willing to serve that current power structure. I have a brilliant episode on that. I'm not going to go into that because that is the evolution of white supremacy. The evolution of white supremacy, white male Christian supremacy in this country is Judeo-Christian values. Right? That's how they solve that. That's how Ben Shapiro can get beyond the fact that it is predominantly an evangelical Protestant country that they're trying to preserve, with no room for hell. They used to didn't even have room for Catholics, but now they brought them in underneath the pro-life movement, and they're cool, right? They definitely didn't have room for Jews, but now they have this Judeo-Christian. It evolves. White supremacy evolves. I don't want to get back into that episode. Go find that episode and listen to it. But the point is that it evolves and it adapts, and it will assimilate anyone who's willing to serve it. That is the driving force for anyone who's willing to go embrace fascism, which in the context of American politics, political economy right now, is an even more obscene version of neoliberalism. Republicans are neoliberals. Neoliberalism, at best, is a constant. At best, in the context of the arguments that you guys are making, right? I'm actually saying it in reverse, but I digress. At best, neoliberalism is a constant. But if you treat it as a variable, then it makes even less sense to suggest that a person is going to leave neoliberal centrism, represented by the Democratic establishment, to go and embrace an even worse version that they will get with the Republican Party. I think the best example I've already given a couple of times. I'll give it one more time, but I probably can say it more succinctly. If neoliberalism is represented by the Democratic Party, then they would be that 26% interest rate that you're currently getting right now today. That's what, if you get bad credit, that's what you're going to get. Bernie Sanders, representing the left, doesn't represent socialism, doesn't represent a revolution. Bernie Sanders represents how capitalism can save itself at 15% interest. I'll take it. I'll take it. But you don't leave 26% outraged that we couldn't get 15% and say the solution is to go over there with the Republicans and take 50% interest rate. It just doesn't make any goddamn sense. I've got videos to do. Video content coming out today. You deserve to be a patron. I need you to be a patron because we're all stuck in this capitalistic system and I got bills to pay. www.patreon.com/the BPD show. I'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Thank you.